Good, good. Take your Bibles and turn to Galatians chapter 2 and verse 16. Last week we did something that was a little different. We actually read through the entire book of Galatians. We started from the very beginning and went all the way through all 6 chapters. We read it kind of in the motif of you were the Galatians and you were receiving the letter for the first time, and so you had someone in your congregation that was reading it to you. That's what I was hoping would come across. And then as I read through it, I gave a little bit of commentary as we went along. Now we're coming back. We realized last week that there were 11 specific places in Galatians when it's talking about the law. It appears from the English translation that the law was done away with. So tonight we're going to examine and start looking at, is that what Paul was saying? Even in reading Galatians straight through and understanding, taking it in context, we found, no, that's not what he was saying. But now it's important to really just kind of focus in on those verses and meditate on them a little bit and pull out some other things that we need to understand. And so we're going to do that. Galatians chapter 2, this is what we find. We find that the plaintiff is coming and he says that the law justifies nobody. The law doesn't justify anybody. And I told you last week that is absolutely true. The law itself does not justify anybody. That's true. But we've taken it in theology to another point, to another dimension even, to say, okay, because the law doesn't justify us, we don't need it anymore. That's about as absurd as someone on death row going to court and all the laws are against him because they prove through a jury, through the evidence, through the laws that are set forth, that this guy or gal committed murder, first degree, premeditated murder. And so the laws of the land says this is what's supposed to happen. Now, Yahweh's word says that person is supposed to die. It's supposed to be execution. That's what's supposed to happen according to God's word. But we've kind of softened God up in these last days, and we've made him the great-grandfather in the sky, so he's got a little more patience. That's why when he comes again, he's going to destroy the world with fire, right? I mean, this is the grandpa loses it. Which my grandkids understand that thought. But now we look at this guy or gal that has committed first-degree murder, and then we say, all right, now we come to the point where we give the sentence, we put the sentence on him, we execute the sentence, whatever it is, whether it's lifetime in prison, depending on where you are, or if it is execution, the person pays the penalty. Now we say, we no longer need the laws of murder. Because we just killed the guy who committed murder, so the law of murder doesn't apply anymore. Does that make any sense at all? Because there's another bozo out there who's going to get upset and lose it and kill somebody. And if you have no law, you go, well, there's no law against murder anymore because that was done away with when so-and-so died, remember? So we don't have it anymore, and we're just supposed to apply grace here. They didn't really mean to kill this person. You know, their body wasn't shred up and thrown all over the place. He just had a bad day. Really? And we take that same model, that same concept of thinking, and apply it to this verse. The law never justifies. The law said this guy was guilty. He committed the crime. The book says, the law says, the instruction says, if you do this, you're in violation. He did it, he's in violation. The law is not going to justify him. There's something outside the law that's going to justify him. We as peers, we come in and we can see through the evidence that we see and understand and make a correct judgment, but we do not execute the sentence. That's not for us. That's for him. Unless it's a civil crime, and then we have permission by Yahweh who set up the civil system for us to have decent order and what we're supposed to do. But we forget that principle and how it plays out is exactly the same principle as we look at Yahweh's law for us. We try to disassociate and say, well, it's completely something different. Well, is it? How can it be? Because within His law are the laws for civil, spiritual, how we're supposed to act personally. And yet we've done away with that to say, I can do whatever I want because God is just going to go, they'll be better tomorrow. They're just having a bad day. And unfortunately, a great deal of theology in Christian today teaches that God's grace has superseded everything, and yet it isn't that way at all. And we're going to see what Shaul was really saying here when he talks about the law justifies nobody. All right, you with me? All right, let's hang on as we go through this. In Galatians 2:16, it actually starts in the beginning, in the middle of the sentence, so we need to back up and read the first part to get a better understanding. But unfortunately, what most people like to do is they like to slice and dice, and they'll just take verse 16 out. Take that first phrase that says, knowing that a man is not justified by faith of law, which is the Levitical law we saw, but it is through faith in Yeshua Messiah. And so they say, see, it's faith in Messiah, not the law, that brings justification. And that's exactly what Paul is saying there. But listen to the context of how he is saying this. You find that by looking at verse 15. For if we have a Jewish nature ourselves, if we being Jewish, Paul's saying, I'm a Jew. And if I'm a Jew and have the nature of Jew, and I understand that it's not through the law that I'm saved, well, what about those that are not of the Jewish persuasion? What if you are Goyim? And I love how it, in different Bibles translations, it says Gentile sinners. And when you look up the word sinners there, it's ethos. And it doesn't mean sinners. It means how you live. So the Gentiles live contrary to the way of the law of Yahweh. And so you have the dichotomy of nations, of peoples. You have Yahweh's people. And then the Gentiles who live contrary or different to. So when it says Gentiles of sinners, it's talking about how they live. And sinners, we know sin literally means what? Lawless. Why? They're not underneath the Torah instructions of Yahweh. They're not Israel. And because of that, they are different. And they're lawless. They're sinners. They're people that are outside. So then he goes on after defining, understanding, he says, we know that we're not justified by the works of the Levitical law, but that it is through faith in Yeshua Messiah. We also believe in Messiah Yeshua, that we may be justified by faith in Messiah and not by works of the Levitical law, because all flesh will not be justified by the works of law. And I know, and I'm reading from the Hebrew Roots Bible here, and it inserts the word Levitical to help you to understand this. If you remember last week when we were going through this whole process of reading the book, and I was reading this, I said, hang on, we're going to find out in the letter why we know that he's speaking specifically about a specific law, and we find it in chapter 3 and verse 19 and 21. So let's look at those. What is the law? We keep referring back to the Levitical law to it, and here's why. Why then the law? If you keep the reminder what the law is there. What is the law? Why then the law? It was placed where? Where? Beside the Ark of the Covenant. It was placed beside the Torah for the sake of what? Transgression. Until the seed should come to whom it had been promised, being given by promise in a mediator's hand. So picture this. What's taking place? You have the Ark of the Covenant in the Holies of Holies. What was put in the Ark of the Covenant? The covenant. The covenant was put inside. What was put beside the Ark of the Covenant? The book of the law. So you have the book of the covenant and the book of the law. Why was the law given? Because of transgression. See, the covenant was given because of promise. Paul talks about that. We're going to read about that in a few moments. That the promise that was given to Abraham was a promise, no condition. Sound familiar? Because of Messiah, there's no conditions anymore. But what happened? The children of Israel transgressed. They chose to take all of Yahweh's instructions and go, oh, we need a God. Moshe's been gone too long. Let's build us a calf. And we'll call him Yahweh. No wonder God wanted to just fry him and do them all away. And we're only talking days after he had visited them and had received the instructions of the covenant, which was a spiritual thing. And now he's at a point where he just wants to say, enough, Moses, get out of the way. I'm just going to level this and we'll start with you. We'll start all over again. And Moses is a type of Messiah where he steps up and says, but Yahweh, your name in all the world is going to see that you brought people out just to destroy them. This is who you are. You're supposed to be the Redeemer. And because he was willing to talk face to face with Yahweh, Yahweh said, I won't do it then. I don't know about you. The rest of the people, when they heard his voice, trembled. Moshe has enough, what's the Jewish word? Huspah. That he's talking with, he's reasoning with Yahweh. But if you do that, your name, what's it going to do to you? Do you think about that when you get ready to sin? What is this going to do to you, God? I know what I'm going to get out of it. I'm going to have some pleasure here. Because sin is pleasurable for a season. So I got something good happening for me for a little bit, and that's all I'm thinking about. But if I stop long enough to really go, what's this going to do to you, Abba? How's it going to make you feel? How are you going to see me afterwards? What's that going to do to our relationship? How do you feel about that? You know, with teaching young people, I often share with them my personal relationship with Tina, and when I'm tempted, I'll often say, well, what will that do to Tina? If I act out, how is that going to make her feel? That's a great deterrent. When you don't want to hurt someone that you really love, you won't do things, or you will do things that you normally wouldn't do or even think twice when you stop and think for a few moments, what is this going to do to this person? And if you truly care about them, it helps curb who you are. You'll make better decisions. And Moshe goes before Yahweh, makes a petition, even though the people didn't deserve it. They deserved to die. They mocked God. It was like shaking their fist in his face. After they had just received the promise. It's been 430 years, and they were on their way to the promised land. They had received part of the promise, not all of it, because the promised seed, the Messiah, hadn't come. But the promise of bringing them and growing them was all part of the process. God was doing that with them. And they rejected it. By why? By means of having selfish desires and wanting to please themselves. By falling back on what they thought God would be okay with. And he's not okay with stuff like that. And so as we see that taking place, Moshe goes back down off the mountain. He takes the tablets of stone which have on it the covenant promise. 2 copies. Because in antiquity, they made 2 copies, one for the person on one side of the contract and the other person to have one. And they both were going to be put in the Ark of the Covenant for safekeeping. They get down to the base of Moses gets down to the base of the mountain, sees what's going on. What does he do? He breaks the tablet. Why? Because the contract was no good. They had already broken it. And so when he had to go back up, Yahweh had to rewrite the covenant But he also wrote something else called the law. And the law was going to be something that kept them in check until. And this is what Paul is talking about when he's talking about this in verse 19 of chapter 3. So why then the law? Why the Levitical law? Why the Levitical system? Because it will keep us in check. This is what you have to do to know that I am Yahweh, to know that I am a God that not only deserves to be revered, but demands it as well. And so you had to get close to the lamb, and then you had to sacrifice it at Pesach. You had sacrifices that you had to do for even a joyous occasion. You killed something. Can you imagine that? I can't imagine, we just want to praise the Father today. Let's go kill a lamb. But that's the Levitical system. Now we go to Messiah, who was the perfect lamb sacrificed. See, nothing's changed. It was just transferred from a physical, man-driven system that was ordained by God, and through Messiah is now transferred to the Melchizedek high priest. And now we're following in that. That's who you are under today if you're in Messiah, is the Melchizedek high priest, King Yeshua. So that it was the law, it was placed by the Torah beside it for the sake of their transgressions, because they transgressed, until the seed should come, Messiah, to whom it had been promised, being given by promise in a mediator. And that promise was given 430 years before any of this took place, as far as Moshe and what was taking place. And then, of course, we know it was 1,500 years later when Messiah came, the seed, to fulfill this. And Paul even talks about that. We addressed it as the fate or the faithful one that was coming. So as we see what Paul is talking about in Galatians here, he's talking about the law being specific, the Levitical law, because he tells us so right here. We don't have to guess what it is. In Genesis 26, verses 3 through 5, it says this: "Stay in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and to your seed I will give all these lands, and I will cause to rise my oath which I swore to your father Abraham. And I will increase your seed like the stars of heavens, and I will give you the star of heavens, and I will give to your seed all these lands. And all the nations of the earth shall be blessed themselves in your seed, because..." Now this is Yahweh speaking to Isaac. And he says, I'm going to fulfill the promise, not the law, the promise that I gave to Abraham. And I'm going to continue it in you. I don't want you to go to Egypt. I want you to stay here so I can show the world by blessing you. And if the world blesses you, they will be blessed as well. Because, now let's see what because is. Because Abraham listened to my voice, he heard. He heeded my charge. He did something about it. He heeded my commandments. He heard them and obeyed them. He heard and he obeyed my statutes. And he heard and obeyed my Torah. This is in Genesis chapter 26. This is 430 years before the Levitical law was given. What was in place? Even though it was oral, it hadn't been written out yet, Abraham had it. What did he have? He had it all. He had the covenant. He had the promise. He had it all. He had the Torah. He had the instructions. He had the statutes. He had the commandments, and he passed it to Isaac. Yahweh's even talking to Isaac, reminding him of the promise. And Isaac was to pass it on to Jacob, and Jacob was to pass it on to his 12 children, who were to pass it on. And that's what they did. So they knew, they had a concept, because it continued. Now, Yahweh was giving them a physical, hard copy of his word, carved in stone by his finger, Yahweh's finger. And now he has it. The children of Israel has it. But here's Abraham. And it says he's going to do this because Abraham did something. He did something. He listened with his ears. And in his heart, his mind, he took those instructions, and to the best of his ability, he obeyed them and followed them. He followed the Torah. Whether he understood it or not, who can understand? We mock because we don't understand how a 100-year-old man and a 90-year-old woman can have a baby. It is physiologically impossible in our day and age. And evidently it was pretty impossible back then too, because Sarah laughed. Didn't she? That's what Scripture says. And when the Spirit of God called her out on it, she said, oh. What do we do when we sin? I didn't mean to. I have no words. Our kids do something wrong. We ask them who did it. I don't know. Or nobody. It's like, seriously? There's you in the room. I know, but it wasn't me. Got chocolate all over their face, cookies in their hair. It wasn't me. We laugh because we've seen it, but we do the same thing to Yahweh. Think we're getting away with it. But what does the word Torah mean? You see, we throw that word out, and we look at it from the English word perspective, and we see Torah, Torah. And we think, first 5 books of the Bible. We think, the laws, the instructions of Yahweh. But what does it mean? And we go back to the original Hebrew, not the original, but an original Hebrew, and you have the 3 letters that comprise the Torah, and you have the Tav, you've got the Resh, and you've got the Hey. That's Torah right there in Hebrew. Don't you feel smart? Doesn't that look good? We know Torah in Hebrew and in English. So I ask you again, what does it mean? Let's go back a little further. Let's look at the Paleo-Otiot Hebrew. These are the picture words for the letters that give us some insight of the meaning. I didn't put them on your paper because I want you to write them down, and I want to go through them slowly so you understand. Instead of just reading it, there's so much here. So when Abraham was keeping the Torah, this is what he was doing. First of all, you have the first letter is a T or an X. It's a mark. All right? The second one is a head of a man. And then the third one is this guy here praising, lifting his hands, moving. All right? And that's the Hey, which is, you see in the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Wah He. It's in there twice, which means behold the hands, behold the feet. So in Yahweh's name is a picture of Yeshua. How cool is that? Isn't that cool? So let's see how cool it is as we look through the Torah and what Torah means in Otiot and ancient Paleo. First of all, Tav or Ta, to go with the ancient, it means to mark. To mark. Like on a map, X marks the place where the treasure is, right? It's a mark. There's a location. There's a specificity of where something is located or where you can find something. So in the Torah, you will be able to find what you're looking for. So it's also a sign. Hello? You're driving down the street and it says you need to go this way. How do you know? There's a sign that points the right way, right? Scripture is going to point. Torah points you. It's a sign to point you to the right way. It is a also means one's signature or one's character. In the Old West, they didn't know how to write cursive or even English. A lot of people, when they were staking out their lands and buying property, what did they do? They would make their mark. And a lot of times it was just an X. And it was interesting because they could even look at the X and say, well, that was your X, but your X definitely looks different. Even as something as simple as that, it was their own signature. It was unique, one of a kind. And Yahweh's word is one of a kind. It speaks of Him. It is His signature so that we can get to know who He is. So we can have that relationship that He desires from us. It is a monument. It is something that's before us to always have in front of us to remind us that Yahweh is the creator of the universe. And so just the very first letter in Torah says so much to us. But what about the next letter? As we look at Hey, it has to do with headship. Someone being supreme or over the covering and looking over all things. There's someone who is supreme. So the resh is going to have to do with headship. It has to do with thought. As in, how a man thinks, so is he. What really defines me, or what really defines you, is your character, right? On the outside, you can behave one way. But on the inside, you can be a whole different person. But Yahweh says, watch out, because as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Eventually, you will be found out. People are going to see what kind of scoundrel you are, or what kind of saint you are. You live long enough, you're going to prove to be one or the other. And isn't that true? We can see people in our own lives that we can recognize and go, you know, that person all their life was a good person. Because what was inside was good, and that's what came out. And then we see others, we go, they were just miserable. They did good things. They might have been philanthropists. They might have given and done things, but they were just miserable people. And so the resh has to do with thinking, what you are, what you really are inside. See, only you know you. My wife doesn't know me. Every now and then I still surprise her. And she'll go, wow. And sometimes it's, wow. Depends on what comes out, right? And so it's what's inside. And so as we think of this as the Torah level, we are getting inside the mind of Yahweh to know who He is. To know His holiness, His righteousness, His justice, His love, His grace. All these characteristics about Him are going to show through. And that's what resh has to do. It has to do with chief. It has to do with being first. And then Hey has to do with being in awe, or to look, or behold. It's like Yod He Wah He, behold the hands, behold the feet. And to be in such an awe that it just takes your breath away. It's like, oh. And the first time I heard what Hey meant, in the name Yahweh, it was like, oh, that's incredible, how wonderful. In His name, Yahweh, Yeshua is Yahweh saves. I mean, His name is there. It's everywhere, and it's just amazing. But it also has to do with revelation. So the Torah, speaking of Yahweh, the Creator, who is the head, who is chief, who is first, the signature of who He is, this is a revelation about Him, a revelation of how He wants to interact with us. It has to do with the fifth dimension of the Spirit. The spirit realm that we don't talk much about, but Paul alludes to in several passages of Scripture. But I guess the most famous one is, we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against, spirituality. That spiritual power that's out there, that fifth dimension. We don't talk much, but it's there. And the Word deals in that realm, in a realm that we can't even begin to understand. And that's what Torah is. What a beautiful picture when you look at it like that. It's more than just regulations and rules and standards. It's so much more. It's more than even a love letter. I can't even articulate what I want to say here. It's just this, wow. It's resh. It's beyond my thought. It's awesome. Because this translates over to who Messiah is, the living Torah. So you have the written Torah and the living Torah. And they are echad. They are one in Messiah. I don't get it. My mind is too small to comprehend it. But it's such an awesome thing. So when you look at Torah or you hear the word law, don't think of it in the Greek-Roman way that we've been taught, that we think of a judicial system, that law, you broke the law, so now you have to pay the price. Law is instructions. His Torah is a guidebook that guides you to Him. He says, you want instructions to me? With over 40 million roads in America, there's only one way to get to a certain house. You can take all the other roads you want, but when you get to that last little bit, if you don't turn down Union Street and turn down First Street and then turn down Railroad Street, you're never going to get to the house at the end of Railroad Street that's a dead-end street, because there's no other way to get there. One way. There's only one way to get to the Father, to get to the Son, and that's through His Word and following Yeshua, because Yeshua is the Word. And if you're following that to the best of your ability, He will continue to reveal His truth to you. All right, let me go through the rest of this quickly. See, as we're looking at justification here, coming back to the main topic here, justification is received by faith. Listen to what he says in Psalms 123:2. Behold, as the eyes of a servant look to the hand of their masters, as the eyes of a maiden to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes wait on Yahweh, our Elohim, until He shows us His grace. Grace is received through faith. See, the servants can work as hard as they want to, but until the master shows grace, they have none. They have to have that grace and favor from the Lord. Justification is exhibited by works. We receive grace by faith, but it is exhibited in our works. Listen to Exodus 15:26. And he said, if you carefully listen to the voice of Yahweh your Elohim, and do what is right in His eyes, and you give ear to His commandments, and keep all His statutes, I will not put on you all the diseases which I have put on Egypt. For I am Yahweh Rapha, which means Yahweh your healer. People say, well then, if we follow this, if we follow Yahweh's instructions completely, we're kept safe. And that is true. He is our healer. But if we don't keep them, what's the opposite? There's no healer there. So here's the dilemma. See, the church paints it like this. Here's Yahweh Rapha. He's going to heal you, and you're healed. And that looks so nice. And so we'll accept His blessing. But if we choose to get out from underneath that and we start doing bad, then what God does now is God rains down His anger and wrath on you, and all these diseases that were from Egypt, now you get to have. Is that what the Scripture's saying there? No, it isn't. What it's saying is Egypt is diseased. We are in a sick world of sin. We are in a depraved nature. Our world is sinful around us. When we come to Messiah, He heals us. If we choose not to accept that healing, we go back into the world of sin sickness. God isn't punishing us. We're punishing ourselves. We're putting ourselves back in there. He's saying, look, I've got the answer to the problem. Come to me. And if you come to me, I will be your Rapha. I will be your healer. But if you don't come to me, there's no healing. I'm not putting that on you. I said from the beginning, if you do this, you will be blessed. If you do this, you'll be cursed. Why? Because those are the laws of nature that are set in place. And He's not going to change them. I don't care how much faith you have. If you jump out of the plane at 30,000 feet, you're not going up. You're going down. That is foolishness, not faith. But don't we behave in foolishness a lot of times? We say, but I think God will be okay with this, when we know Scripture says don't do it. Because I'm stepping outside the healing of Yahweh. I'm getting away from His Rapha, and I'm stepping back out here into the sinful world to do what I know is going to cause me to get sinful again. Because sin means I'm violating the things that are keeping me in right standing with Him. And I just step out of it for a little bit. Oh, I don't like this, so I get back, I get right, then I go back out. I'm going to just go back. Exactly. Try that one. At 15,000 feet, I think I made a mistake. You think? Justification exhibits works. It has to. Faith without works is, if it's dead, it's dead. I mean, how many keep a dead dog? My dog died last year, but there he is on the porch. I'll pet him every now and then. He's kind of stiff, you know. There for a while, boy, did he really stink. But I still love him. Boy, I wish I could hear him howl. But he's deader than a doornail. Look, there he is. Bubba. My hound dog, Bubba. There he is. Maybe one day he'll come to life. I'm hoping. So I'm going to leave him right there, and one of these days I'm going to come out, and there he'll be. Wagging his little tail at me and wanting to come back up in my lap. Is that going to happen? No, dead is dead. Dead means it's over. Dead means there's no more chances. Death means finality. So you have to have works. There has to be something that shows. If you don't have anything showing that you are justified, you're dead. You just don't know it yet. You're still walking around in a dead body. Justification is given because of obedience. And that's, again, the passage that we just read could fill in that part of that. Justification comes by our obedience to His living Torah, Yeshua, and following the example He set forth by being obedient to His Father by keeping all of the Torah. Isn't that amazing? The Torah followed the Torah. Instructions. He kept the instructions in a behavioral lifestyle that pleased Yahweh. That's a phrase you might want to write down. Keeping Torah is a lifestyle. It's a behavioral lifestyle. It's how you act. Well, let's close by doing one quick illustration. How many of you ladies like Hava stuff? Just one person, and the rest of you don't like Hava stuff? This is a bad example. Sorry. No, sorry. I know you like it. This is black mud soap. And I've, yeah. And this is really good soap. It's not that expensive considering it comes right from Israel. It comes from the Dead Sea. It's mud from the Dead Sea with all the minerals and nutrients and stuff in it like this. So who said that they liked it? Grace? Yeah. Okay, Grace, come up here. Now, Grace, before now, you had no idea that I was going to offer this to you, did you? No. Okay. So the concept of you receiving this or me giving it to you is foreign to you. You have no idea what that means because you're just finding out. He's going to give me something. And I'm really giving this to you. This is yours. Okay. You can have it. You had to reach out and accept it. In faith, she took it. Do you believe it's yours? Yes. Do you believe you can take it home and do whatever you want with it? Yes. Okay, it is yours. Thank you. But I initiated the faith in her. Yahweh initiates the faith in you and I. We don't have faith to even come to the Father until He makes us aware of it. Just as I made you aware of the soap, And now she reached out and accepted it. And by accepting it, she's taking all the conditions that I have laid out concerning this soap. And here's some of the conditions.
I have to use it.
Use it.
Okay, I can take it.
Because it's no good if you don't use it. If it just sits on the shelf or you put it someplace else, it's of no value. We might as well give it to someone else. Salvation's the same way. It's a free gift that's given. When you receive it, you use it. It's cleansing. It smells good. I really like it. I use it a lot. It's good stuff. So it's yours.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. You may be seated. Unless we are recipients and then participate and exhibit. Now, what did she say to me? She was grateful. She was like, I'm really getting this. Yes. It's mine. Yes. And you know what? She will use it. And it will have benefit. This is what Yahweh is teaching us in the Torah. His instructions have benefit. They will help us. It will lead us in right relationship with Him. He initiates the faith by extending it to us, and we reach out in faith, accept it. But He initiated it. And that's how faith works. None of us have faith. Because if I didn't have something to offer her, she would have never come up to me and said anything. In fact, what did she say? I didn't raise my hand the first time because, one, you're so crazy anyway, I didn't know what you were going to do. No, you didn't say that, but that's what most people were thinking. That's like, should I raise my hand? I don't know what he's going to do. She was writing, so she was preoccupied. But then when she heard, well, so, I like that soap. And because she now recognized faith because it was shared with her, Yahweh opens up because of Messiah, the faithful one. He brings us. He's the one who delivers us. And now we need to exhibit the gift that He's given us by living according to the Torah. That's what Torah does for us. Okay? Next week, we will look at a whole new section called something. Christians are dead to the law, which is great. I'm going to have a lot of fun. I get some really good examples about that.